This Shabbat is Shabbat called Shabbat Chazon. Chazon is a vision. Chazon is a prophecy. It's always the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av is always the Parsha of Dvarim. Dvarim, the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to start the fifth and last book of the Torah. Always, every year, the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. The 9th of Av, this huge fast day, which we're going to talk about today. So this Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon because of the words of the Haftarah, that we're going to read after the Torah reading. We're going to read the beginning of the prophecies of Isaiah. It says there, Chazon, right? That's the word. Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amoz, Asher Chaza al Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. It's the vision, it's the prophecy of Isaiah, son of Amoz, who prophesied the destruction of Judah and Jerusalem. And he describes there very harshly why it's going to be destroyed, because the Jews are thieves and because they chase after bribes and money, and that's all they care about. They don't care about the poor and the orphan and the widow, and that's why the temple is going to be destroyed. And this is the third and last haftarah in 3 haftarot in a row that we read what we called Shalosh de Puranuta. Puranut is destruction, sad things that come, and those are the 3 destructions that were described by the prophets. And from now on, from next Shabbat, we are going to start the Sheva de Nechamata, the 7 Shabbatot, Haftarot, weeks of comforting. There are going to be 7 Shabbatot that are going to take us all the way to Rosh Hashanah. Yes, it's crazy, scary, but Rosh Hashanah is coming up already in a few weeks, and already we're looking up to it. In 3 days' time, it is probably going to be a very happy festive day, Tisha B'Av, but on the sad occasion, if the temple will not be built within 3 days, then we're going to have to fast, as we've been doing for the past 2,000 years. We're going to have to fast, and the prophets tell us, especially a very clear verse in the prophet Zechariah. Zechariah says, "Ko amar Hashem tzvaot, tzom harevi'i, v'tzom hachamishi, v'tzom hashevya'i, v'tzom ha'asiri, yihiyeh levet Yehuda lesasson ulesimcha u'lemoadim tovim." So he's promising us in a very comforting way, those 4 fast days that we have in the Jewish calendar, marking and the destruction of the temples, are going to turn out to be happy days. In the Torah and also in the Tanakh, we don't have names for the months of the year. We only have numbers. So we count the numbers of the months from the month of Nisan. So Tzom HaRevi'i is actually, if we count from Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. Tammuz is number 4, 17th of Tammuz, which we just fasted 3 weeks ago. That's called Tzom HaRevi'i. The next month, which is Tzom HaChamishi, that's Tisha B'Av. The 9th of Av is on the 5th month, and that's why it's called Chamishi. And the Mishnah, 2,000 years ago already, says the 5 terrible things that happened on that same date, the 9th of Av. And that's starting all the way from the time where the Jews were in the desert and they asked to send spies into the land to see what Israel is like. And the spies came back with a negative report, and the Jews started crying. They don't want to go into Israel. So God said, "You don't want to go? Excellent, you won't go. You'll be stuck here. Within the next 40 years, this whole generation will die." That punishment was given to the Jewish people on the 9th of Av. The second thing that happened on the 9th of Av is a destruction of the first temple. Under the king Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, the Babylonian king, and his head of army called Nebuzaradan, that they destroyed the first temple. Although it says there that they actually, in terms of God's eyes, they actually destroyed a temple that was already destroyed because the Jews did not merit to have the temple. They were worshiping idols. They were doing adultery. They were murdering people without even thinking twice. And it's no wonder that the temple they didn't deserve to have it. Luckily, 70 years later, the second temple was built, but a few hundred years later, it will be destroyed as well by Titus. I think his name is the Roman leader there. And again, from our perspective, we didn't deserve to have the temple, and that's why it was destroyed for one huge sin, which is equal to those murder and idol worshiping that I mentioned. And that is selfless hatred. People were horrible to each other. That's the reason for the destruction of the second temple. And just for us to feel bad, the reason that the third temple is not yet being built is because we are still fighting and hating each other. The fourth thing that happened on Tisha B'Av, that's the city of Beitar. I look out my window now and I see Beitar down there in the valley. Today, Haredi city, but in the old days, it was even a bigger city with so many Jews in it, and the Romans killed everybody. That happened on the 9th of Av, which marked the finish, the ending of the Bar Kokhba revolt as well. The fifth thing that happened on 9th of Av is that Jerusalem was destroyed. They didn't leave anything, no building, nothing. Tornus Rufus, the wicked man, after destruction of Beitar, he actually destroyed the whole of Jerusalem. And so we know of this sentence in Judaism that leads us throughout the way that on a date that good things happened, good thing will happen in the future. And on a date that bad things happen, bad things will happen in the future. And so we mark many other things on the 9th of Av, including the expulsion of the Jews from England and 15 years later from France, right? That's 700 years ago. And then from Spain, 500 years ago. And thing that happened during First World War and Second World War. And not comparing, but the disengagement from Gaza, what I call the Girush, the expel of the Jews from Gaza Strip, from Gush Katif, also was planned for the 9th of Av. And a year later, on a more personal note, that's when I had to go into the Second Lebanon War as a soldier, which was also very bad. And we went into Lebanon exactly on the 9th of Av. The rabbis put together many stories giving us the atmosphere of why the temple was destroyed. And those stories are actually gathered in the section of the Talmud called Gittin. It's the section that deals with divorce. How do people get divorced if they have to? And there they speak about destruction. Why they do that, we'll see in a second. Last year, we gave a whole lesson about some of those stories. And then if you remember the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, those two men that by mistake, one was invited to the party while the other one was supposed to, but they had similar names. So the messenger made a mistake, and then that guy was kicked out of the party. I won't go into that story now, but he embarrassed him in public. And there are many other sad stories there that is revealed there about crazy things that kids were taken in a boat. And when they realized they were taken to be for prostitution, they jumped from the boat to their death into the ocean, into the sea. And also the story of Hannah, this brave woman that all her children, 7 children were killed in front of her eyes when they refused to bow down to the idols that the Caesar put there, and she actually turns. It's heartbreaking. She turns to Abraham. She turns to her sons, and she says to them, "Go to Abraham in heaven and tell him, you sacrificed one son, I sacrificed seven." And then she fell from the roof and she died as well. Very, very sad stories. And on Tisha B'Av, we shouldn't learn Torah, but we are allowed to learn those stories because they don't make you happy, they make you sad. I want to elaborate today about one story, just one story that is written there, the last story of the lot. And the story is told about um, a carpenter who had a helper, a servant. And that servant was very viciously and evilly clever. And the servant liked the carpenter's wife. And so once the carpenter was looking for a loan of money, the servant says, "I'll give you the money. I have lots of money." I don't know how he had money, but he said, "Send your wife to me, so I'll give her the money." And the carpenter very naively sent his wife. And she goes to him and she stays with him for 3 days. And then the servant goes to the carpenter and says, "Hi, I'm back." So the carpenter says, "What do you mean? Where's my wife? I sent you my wife 3 days ago. What's happening?" So he told him, I gave her the money and sent her straight away. But I heard that some bad youngsters there, they raped her on the way. So the carpenter asked him, "Look at this crazy story. What should I do?" So the servant answered him, "I suggest you divorce her. Finish." So the carpenter says, "No, but I promised her lots of money in the ketubah, the marriage certificate. I wrote down that if we get divorced, I pay her a lot, but I don't have that money." So that servant told him, "I'll give you the money. I'll give you the loan. You'll pay me when you can, whatever, in however long time." So he said, "Fine." So the carpenter divorced his wife. Straight away, that servant married her. When the time came to give back the loan, the servant told the carpenter, "Where's the money you owe me?" So he said, "Well, I don't have the money." He said, "Okay, so you'll be my slave." Look how this whole story turned over. And now the carpenter is going to be the servant's servant. And so the terrible story ends by the couple, the new couple, sitting and drinking, and the one pouring the wine into the cups is actually the one who used to be the guy with the money, used to be the guy with the wife, and now he's just their servant. And it says that he was crying, and his tears fell into their cups of wine. On that moment, that's when the verdict was sealed that the temple should be destroyed. Now, there are lots of questions we need to ask about this story. We need to understand it a little bit better, and that's a terrible, terrible story. The story is actually telling us I highlighted a few words here. I don't know if your Hebrew is good enough, but it says there, I'll make it bigger for you so you can see, Shager ishtecha etzli. Shager means send her. But why do they use that word, Shager ishtecha etzli? Because Shager is the same letters as Garesh. Same 3 letters as Garesh. Garesh means divorce her. So already the servant is hinting to the carpenter, divorce your wife. Shager, send her to me. Ve'alvena. Look at the play on words we can do. Ve'alvena literally means, I will give her the money. Or it could actually means, ve'alvena, I will borrow her. Not the money will be given to her. I will borrow her. And that's what happened. She stayed with him for 3 days. What's the story? Who's here to blame? Why do you send your wife somewhere else? Why don't you care that she doesn't come home after 5 minutes? How can you let it be for 3 days? And what about the wife? Is she also to be accused? She goes and she wants to be with this man. That's how it looks. It says there, Shahata imo. She stayed with him. She stayed with him probably willingly. No one forced her. Maybe it was all planned with her, that this whole thing was planned so she'll be divorced from the one, so she can marry the other. Now, the story is told in a very clever way that you don't see any sin. You don't see any wrongdoings on the, how do you call it, straight out, but it's very clear behind the scene. It's very clear that actually everything is wrong. Everything is wrong in what's happening here. And so if we look at the story, we can say that that servant was so horrible. Not only he wanted the carpenter's wife, but he also didn't stop, which we don't know why. Why does he hate him so much? Until he steps on him when he's down already and carry on beating him up and making him suffer even more. And what's happening here? It's crazy. This whole story is crazy. It shows the, I don't know, sadism or wickedness or terribleness of, it's so wrong the way the whole thing is going on. And the woman, is she going willingly or not? And maybe the man actually gave her away. We're not sure. We're not sure. But what we do know is that there are eyes in the beginning. Look, I highlighted in green. מעשה באדם אחד שנתן עיניו. He put his eyes on that woman, and then at the very end of the story, the eyes come back again, where the tears came out of the other guy's eyes. Everything turned upside down. If originally those three people met at the carpenter's house, now all the roles changed. The carpenter was the boss, and now he's the servant, and the servant was the servant, and now he's the boss, and the wife juggles in between, and the eyes was in the beginning, and now they come back in the end. And the rabbis teach us that when tears shed, when someone's crying, it really influences on the verdict. It influences, as if we can say, it influences God, and God doesn't just go by when someone cries so deeply from the bottom of his heart. Yes, maybe that carpenter, he's to blame as well. Maybe he was giving away his wife, the way he was just divorcing her without asking, how are you? I just heard that someone was torturing you and they raped you. What's the story? All he wants is to divorce her. What's the story? And so, yet he cries at the end. And that shakes heaven and earth. And that's just one example of why the temple should be destroyed. If that's how they act, if that's how they behave in such a terrible world, then they don't deserve, we don't deserve to have the temple at all. And so the rabbis looked at those stories and they said, the rabbis could have given many reasons why the second temple was destroyed. Maybe the Jews didn't keep Shabbat. Maybe they didn't put a mezuzah properly, whatever they did. But actually, it was selfless hatred. It was about embarrassing other people, taking someone else's wife. Those are the things that caused the temple to be burnt. And we mentioned once before that the prophet Micha is telling us what we should do. He's living at that time of the end of the second temple, and he's begging the people. Higid lecha adam ma tov. God told you what's good. God told you what's the right way to do. And what is it? Asot mishpat. You should do justice. Ve'ahavat chesed. You should love the kindness והצנע לכת עם אלוהיך. And you should be humble in walking the way of God. That's what it's about. I want to talk a little bit about Tisha B'Av that is coming up. If we will have to fast, if the temple won't be built in the next 3 days, then you should know that it's the second most important fast day. We have 6 fast days in the Jewish calendar, and the most important one is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the only one from the Torah, but the second one in importance is the 9th of Av. 9th of Av, like Yom Kippur, is from evening to evening, from night to the next night. And we're going to talk about how do we start the fast on a Saturday night. We're going to see in a second. But first, you must know that just like Yom Kippur, there are all those 5 prohibitions that we have to keep to on Tisha B'Av. And they are, A, we are not allowed to eat or drink from Saturday night and until Sunday night. B, we are not allowed to touch water, not to wash our face, not to brush our teeth, which is difficult for me. It's one of the most difficult things on the 9th of Av and Yom Kippur. The other fast days we can do, but that's something we shouldn't do. We don't wash our hands unless we have to. And so, we have to wash our hands every morning. That's the morning washing because wake up from the sleep. And then we do the minimum. So if every day we wash our hands, the whole hand is up to here, everything. Now on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, only up to the end of the fingers. That's how we wash our hands. Just the fingers. That's the minimum of washing hands. Obviously, if you got dirty, you have to wash. But if someone spilled on you, whatever, mud or whatever, but unless you got dirty, we don't use water at all. The third thing is not to put any ointment, no creams, no nothing on our body. The fourth is we're not allowed to wear leather shoes or leather sandals. Anything made not of leather, that's allowed, including leather jacket or whatever, that's allowed. But just leather shoes we shouldn't wear. And the fifth and last thing, which is relevant only for a married couple, no marital relationship during those 25 hours. So that's like Yom Kippur. But unlike Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av is an ordinary day. Yom Kippur, we have to keep like Shabbat. No doing of any work like Shabbat. But Tisha B'Av, we can do work. You can drive, you can write, you can cook, whatever you want to do, you can. Although, again, we try not to because we try to concentrate on trying to understand the destruction of the temple. So, which if your employer doesn't let you off, so you go to work, what can you do? You don't risk being fired because of it. And if you have a huge damage of money, then you go to work. But if you can, I, for one, I go to Bet Knesset 7 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to stay there until 11 or 12 because we sit on the floor, and that's an additional custom just for Tisha B'Av, not for young people. We sit on the floor or close to the floor, and we say those lamentations that is a whole book of sad stories and sad songs and poems that we say. Tisha B'Av is a day that is recognized by the state of Israel to be a day that just like people are mourning for their own relatives privately, this is a national day of mourning. And so you'll see that the programs on TV are different, I think, and other things. So people know it's Tisha B'Av coming, which is nice. We don't sit on a high chair, just on close to the floor, as we said, at home and in a synagogue, at night and the following day until lunchtime on Sunday. We don't on Bet Knesset. You might see if you go to shul on on Saturday night, you'll see that in the synagogue they don't put all the lights on. Some people will use candles, others will just sit a little bit in the dark. It's part of the atmosphere of what we're trying to create. You don't say hello to anyone. Just like when you go to a mourner's house, you don't say, "Hi, how are you?" You don't say that. If someone says to you, you just answer them with a very serious face, you nod with your head, and that's it. We don't say hello and talk about nonsense. We don't do happy things, and part of happy things is not to learn Torah. And we can only learn things that are relevant for destruction of the temple. You can go over my lesson and my other lessons that are already, I think they're only in Hebrew, on YouTube. It's good for your Hebrew. By the way, men don't put on tefillin on Tisha B'Av in the morning, but since we have to put on tefillin every day, we're going to do it afternoon. We read the Megillah of Eicha, Lamentation, and that was written by Jeremiah, 5 chapters of description of just before destruction of the first temple, and we read it on the night of Tisha B'Av, and also some read it during the day as well, and he writes there about the terrible situation that was there in Jerusalem before the destruction of the first temple. We also add one thing on Mincha in the afternoon prayer. We add Et Bonei Yerushalayim. With that prayer, we added the Amidah, also something that a prayer called Nachem, that again talks about that we're looking forward to the building of the third temple. And that's reminding us that from the middle of the day, this year, Sunday, from the middle of Tisha B'Av day, we can sit on a chair, we can say hello, we can start learning Torah, we put on tefillin, yet we don't eat or drink yet until the night. All the 5 things we mentioned we don't do until already it's dark. But otherwise, the other things, slowly we get up from our morning. And that's what we do. Now, in terms of Havdalah, it's a little bit confusing. We have 4 blessings in the Havdalah. The one blessing this coming Saturday night is totally disappearing. And that's the blessing for the spices. We don't say the blessing for a good smell. There is nothing to be happy about. So we totally annul it. We get rid of it. We don't say the blessing for the good smell. Now, we cannot really say the blessing for the wine, because before Shabbat comes out, already the fast come in. Again, let me make it clear. There is no mourning on Shabbat. Just like someone in a personal and private mourning, so too here, when someone when on Shabbat, including the third meal on Shabbat, you can eat meat, you can drink wine. I suggest you eat things that are good to start the fast with, right? Because that's going to be a meal before the fast. But usually, on a normal year, we don't eat so much before the fast. We just eat hard-boiled egg, and that's which is a mourner's food, and that's it. You don't eat too cooked things. That's on a normal year. But this year, because it's Shabbat, you can eat as much as you want and whatever you want until sunset. Once the sun is setting, which again, it's still Shabbat, but we stop eating. We stop eating and we get ready without doing anything for Tisha B'Av. So what are we going to do about Havdalah? So we said Havdalah has got 4 blessings. When Shabbat comes out, we say Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh Lechol, and we light the Havdalah candle and we make the blessing Boreh Meoreh Esh. That's it for Saturday night. When we break the fast on Sunday night, we're going to break the fast on the blessing that we missed on Saturday night, which is Boreh Pri Hagafen and Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. So again, the blessing over the good smell disappears. The blessing for the fire we say on Saturday night, and the blessing for the wine and the Havdalah we say on Sunday night before we eat after the fast. That's how we do it. And that's basically it. If you have more questions, you can always ask me. I want to end off with a few short stories again to get into the atmosphere. There's a beautiful story, very famous, but the source of it is not so clear. So don't take me that it's the truth, but it's a nice story. They say about Napoleon. this great army leader who took over the whole of Europe. And Napoleon, he liked the Jews. And he was walking in the street one day, and he heard from the synagogue people crying. And he looked inside, and he see that they're sitting on the floor, and there's very little light. And he asked someone he saw there, "What's happening? Why are you acting in such a sad way? Why are you crying?" And the Jew told him, "We're crying for the destruction of the temple." So the Napoleon asked him, "What do you mean? No one told me your temple was destroyed. What's happening? When did it happen? How? What's the story?" So the Jew told him, "It happened 2,000 years ago. It didn't happen today or yesterday. 2,000 years ago." Napoleon was so impressed that he said the phrase that only a nation who knows how to cry for his past so many years later will survive the future, even the hardest and most difficult challenges of life. And that's what he said. And it's a beautiful idea that we always say, without the past, there is no future. And we try to understand that idea. I want to give you a little bit of a deeper idea, which is a touch on Chassidut. The Chassidim, that's their way of looking at things. They look at the Gemara, and the Gemara, the Talmud says that when the temple was almost destroyed, the first temple, the Babylonian comes into the Holy of Holies, and it says that they saw that the two angels, above the ark that was there in the Holy of Holies, there were images of two, a boy and a girl, kind of angels that they're facing each other. And it says there, they didn't just face each other, they were hugging, and hugging in a way that as if it was some kind of an intimate way of hugging, like a man and woman would do. And that's what they were doing. And so the Hasidim love that idea because they always see the positive side. They always see the beauty of things. And that's based on a Kabbalah. And that's what they say, that from the destruction, that's when the goodness and the happiness and the love of God will come. And there's lots of beautiful play on words. The words Geula. Geula is redemption. Most of the word Geula makes the word Gola. Gola is exile, except for the Aleph. So Gola plus Aleph, exile plus the first letter makes Geula, which teaches us that the exile is part of the redemption. You cannot get to the redemption if you don't go through the exile. Similarly, again, the Hebrew is so deep, so beautiful. Similarly, the word hachlama, lehachlim, means to heal, to get better after being sick. It's the same word as machala plus hey. Machala is a disease. Machala is a sickness. So in hachlama, the way to get to be better, to heal, is coming through the machala. The sickness is a huge parchment of the getting better, and that's how the Hasidim look at things. And we should also try and understand that we go through a process of healing so we can get to the right place. And so just like a building cannot be built before actually destroying the old building, so too our future cannot be built beautifully without destroying the old past and the old building beforehand. So every Tisha B'Av, we remember the destruction of the temple, but we also have a chance to look further and deeper maybe into the destruction and to wish for a proper healing and the right redemption for the Jewish people. There's, just to end off with another beautiful story, and with that we're going to end, a very famous story about two brothers that loved each other, and they got from their father a piece of land. So they split it half and half. And the one brother was married, with lots of children, and the other brother was just a bachelor, no children. And so they lived, and they walked the land, and it was time for harvesting, and they got lots of crops, and then they had lots of wheat. It was beautiful. And that night, they slept in the field, watching that no one would steal anything. Each one slept in his own side of the field. Then thoughts came to the bachelor. He says, my brother is married with children. He's got much more expenses than me. Let me take some of my wheat. I'll give it to him so he can make a living easier. And so he did. He woke up in the middle of the night and he took some of his wheat and gave it to his brother without anyone knowing. That same night, the married brother said, my brother is still a bachelor. He didn't have, like me, he doesn't have a family. I feel sorry for him. I'm sure he needs lots of money to get married, so I'm going to give him some of my wheat. And so he did. And every morning they used to get up and see that, how could it be? I gave some of mine to my brother, and yet I have the same amount that I had the night before. What's happening? Until on the third night, they actually met each other in the middle of the night while they were both walking towards each other. And they say that at that same place, when they realized how nice they are to each other, at that same place, the temple was built. The temple is going to be rebuilt after we rebuild our society. We first have to look at our brothers and see what's good for them, not just what's good for us. And please God, the temple is going to be built on the fact that we don't hate each other, we just look for good in each other. Please God, in our days, Amen. Any questions, anyone, about anything? No. So I wish we won't have to fast this coming Tisha B'Av. And if we do, we'll have it a meaningful fast day so we can correct our ways.